today, what we are attempting to do is summarize what we covered on February the 29th on our show, Speak Seeking Truth and Justice. We were able to have the honorable and wonderful participation of Dr. Marsha Coleman Adebayo. It was a very interesting conversation that we've had, and we decided that we wanted to capture this in a brief overview. And Dr. Adebayo decided that she would join us and kind of summarize what she talked about with regard to the Moses Cemetery and the desecration of a cemetery of many of ancestors out there, and nobody seems to be paying attention to it and doing anything about it. She has been able to organize along with her husband, who's a pastor in the area, and he has been able to put together a group that that is supporting what Marsha is trying to do and bring attention to making sure that this land and the desecration of this cemetery stops. She has a horrible story to tell in reference to what has happened and how it's happened and how it's proceeded. So, Marsha, tell our listening audience, as you did on Thursday night, about what really is going on out there, and talk about the history, talk about, and we'll get into that, and I can ask questions, and talk about the history and what is going on and what kind of attention that you're getting, and why haven't you gotten more attention from our community and from our leaders. Thank you for being on today.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lucas. And this, my admiration for you goes back decades now. From the time that we were marching in front of USDA for justice for Black farmers. So thank you so much for having me on the show. Moses African Cemetery, which is located in Bethesda, Maryland, in one of the wealthiest communities in the world, is a 16th century, a mid-16th century burial ground of essentially African children. And it's important for your listeners to understand that the majority of people who were kidnapped from Africa and came to this country were not adults. They were children. They were between the ages of 4 years old, maybe younger, and 18, 20 years old. They were children, and they were completely and violently separated from their families and had the horrific experience of, being bound and shackled and murdered and raped on the boats on the way to the United States. And then when they arrived in a place like Bethesda, Maryland, these children were just beginning, really, their nightmare. And so in this part of the United States, unlike in Mississippi and Georgia where cotton is grown, this was a tobacco growing area. And your Black farmers are well aware of the tobacco growing tradition in this area. And these children were forced into this really hard labor because tobacco plants, as you know, are very sturdy plants. But the young girls, all these children, in fact, were subject to murder. They were all subject to rape, both the girls and the boys. They were all subject to being murdered at any point in their lives. And yet these children made a decision to live. We've now written 3 books on this topic. And some of the most poignant stories of this process, again, come from children, some of whom, for example, some of the girls who were actually rented out on the weekends as party favors. We have one 5-year-old girl that we know of that was being rented out on the weekends. But there's so many more stories like this. In fact, Harriet Tubman was being rented out on the weekends, as quiet as it's kept. But what we know is that these little girls, when they were rented out on the weekends, had no one to protect them. They were they were vulnerable, and absolutely had no one to protect them. The River Road area is also known for another important but sad historical events, historical episodes. And that is after 1807, when they closed down what they call the transatlantic slave trade. We consider it a barbaric European human trafficking trade. At the same time, the tobacco fields on River Road in this part of Maryland were beginning to wither, because, as you know, tobacco is very hard on the soil. So these captains of industry, as they like to be called, had to decide what other business they would engage in. And they decided that they were going to engage in breeding little African girls. So this is one of the corridors where there was massive sexual violence against little African girls. And even though Hollywood has tried to romanticize these relationships between these old, usually toothless white men who were plantation owners and these little African girls, the reality is that when they were being raped, that was a death sentence for the majority of them. And they knew it. 60% of these little girls would actually bleed out during childbirth. So rape became a death sentence for them. So that's sort of, so this is an area that Montgomery County and the business community would prefer the public never know about. They're much more interested in promoting Bethesda as the home of NIH, the National Institutes of Health, or some of our museums. But very few people understand that this was a place of massacre. This was a place of genocide. This was a place of rape. And Montgomery County has spent an enormous amount of time, effort, and treasure making sure that the public never understands this problem. They have one major problem, however, and that is that our ancestors left their remains behind. They didn't leave they didn't leave the wealth, they didn't leave, that was all taken by the planters, the owners of the land. They didn't leave laughter behind, but they left us their remains to tell their stories. And so Montgomery County has been engaged now for the last 8 years of destroying and erasing any trace of this African community, because it tells the story of European barbarism. And that is not the way they want their history to be told. And so we have been involved in the last 8 years of exposing this history, telling this history. And also you talked about reparations. After emancipation, the African community began to reorganize again on River Road. They were farmers. They were people who understood the value of land, and they understood that land was the only real measure of wealth in this country, not jobs, land. They understood that. And so we actually see this Black community beginning to buy land on River Road. So emancipation is 1865. We now have records showing the Warren family buying land by 1873 on River Road. Now, the land that they bought on River Road, which was the same land where they used to dump the little girls' bodies, is now worth about $50 million. But what happened to the Warren family? What happened to that family? That family was run off of the land around 1962 and forced to become refugees. While whites took over the land, they parceled the land up among themselves, and now these Europeans are reaping the benefits of the Warren family. So, it's very difficult to untie the relationship between Black oppression and our relationship to land, because it is the land that Europeans have so eagerly fought for and so vigilantly fought for to make sure that Black people do not have access to intergenerational wealth. And that's what land represents.
Thank you. The one thing I wanted you to mention as I was listening to you was that important issue of what that land is worth. And the other thing is uh, the fact that here all this is going on in our community and right there in Bethesda, Maryland.
Mhm.
And you also have a somewhat of a benign neglect. And I'm bringing that up because Black farmers are having the same problem with
Mhm.
getting the attention of those people who are supposed to be representing us and
Mhm.
making sure that the land and the wealth is being transferred
Mhm.
to other generations. I think that one of the things that I wanted you to talk about is the connection you see between what is happening to the loss and the continual taking of land and generational wealth from Black farmers. And how does that tie in with what is happening there in Bethesda, Maryland, and with the gravesite and the benign neglect that is being forced on you by those people in high offices in Maryland and not doing anything about this problem?
Right. It all comes down again to land. I'm going to keep using this word over and over again because I think the African American community was sold an empty bill of sales because, to a large extent, particularly during the 1960s and 70s, people were kept, people, the mantra was jobs, 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 right? When the mantra really should have been land, 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 because jobs are temporary and they don't build intergenerational wealth. It is only land that can build intergenerational wealth. And that's the reason why Europeans left their homes in the 14th and 15th century seeking places where they could land, own land. And the land that they stole, either from the Native Americans or stole from Africans or stole from the indigenous populations in South America, has fueled the ability of Europe and their descendants to live the kind of lives that we almost expect white people to have access to. But because we don't control land, whether that's in Africa or the Caribbean or South America or the United States, we have been locked into a second-class citizenship. So when we started this struggle, of course, one of the first, and because of my experience with Black farmers and my family, I come from a Black farmers background. I mean, my family is from Dublin, Georgia. And so I have pictures of my relatives in cotton fields, right? So because we don't necessarily think of ourselves as landowners, we think of ourselves as homeowners, which is important, but land ownership is even more important than home ownership. And that's where the Black farmers movement and this movement intersects. Because when we first started this struggle, the county came to us and said, look, we know that, there's an injustice here. And in terms of, all of these Africans who were murdered, well, they wouldn't say murdered, all these Africans who died, quote unquote, mysteriously on River Road. So what we'll do as a part of, maybe they were thinking reparations, we'll give you a plaque or we'll give you a bench that people can sit on and they can, we'll put the words, Negroes used to live here or whatever the wording would be on the bench. And their mouths would absolutely open when we say, no, 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 you can keep your plaque, you can keep your bench. We are demanding the land. We're demanding the land. So how much is the land worth that these people have now decided belongs to them? The Moses Cemetery land, which is almost 3 acres, which is a lot in Bethesda, Maryland, is worth almost, considering the infrastructure where it's placed and what is currently on, is probably worth about $100 million. Now, for Europeans to think of a Black community taking over, demanding that kind of wealth, for them is almost unimaginable. But that is the legacy that our ancestors left us. Their blood is in that land, and therefore we're demanding that they give that land back. So, you know, a lot of what I'm talking about, quite frankly, I learned at your feet. You know, I mean, I learned, Lawrence, I learned a lot of this at your feet, like watching the Black farmer movement, right? And the farmers demanding justice and demanding the return of their land. What a bold statement. And so this movement basically lifts off from the Black farmers movement. And we don't necessarily see this as quote unquote a cemetery movement, as I said in my last show with you. We see this as a land movement. We're demanding that the land is returned to us with our ancestors in it, but we are demanding the land back.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I want to go back to is that comments that you've been getting for the work that you all are doing to save the land. And a congressman or representative of Congress made some very derogatory comments about your effort to save that land. What was that, and who was that?
Yeah, that was Congressman David Trone, who, you know, made his fortune by selling, you know, wine and liquors basically in the Black community, I think it's called Fine Wines, if I'm correct. I'm not really sure. But anyway, and he's now running for US Senate. He's a US congressman now. And if, you know, he's running commercials every 2 minutes on our TV networks here. And he's a billionaire. So he has plenty of money to spread around. And so there are a lot of Black people on TV singing his praises. And I thought when I first approached him, you know, this guy is okay. You know, I was at a program with Jesse Jackson's son, Jonathan Jackson, had just given this guy glowing accolades. He was speaking at a Black History program. So I didn't hesitate to walk up to him and hand him a leaflet about the desecration, the erasure of our history, the theft of our land in Bethesda, Maryland, and ask him to support us. And as soon as he saw the leaflet, he said, "Who cares about that little cemetery? Who cares about that little cemetery?" Think about what this man is saying to all of us as Black people. I mean, until recently, into the 1960s, when the integration came along, all of our relatives were in those little cemeteries. They were in the back of our homes. They were on our farms. They were in churchyards. So the history of Africans in this country can be told by going to those little cemeteries, the significance of what we've achieved, our ability to survive European barbarism, to survive living in a country that didn't even consider us human. All of that is packed into those little cemeteries. So for this man to walk up to me, or for me to walk up to him, and for him to try to slap me in my face talking about little cemeteries was completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. And this is probably someone whose family came from Europe when our families were in the fields picking cotton. And he's going to talk about little cemeteries. So I just, you know, I went back to him after he said that because I was so shocked. And I said, what did you say to me? And he repeated what he said. I said, okay, fine. And then I think one of his little black aides walked up to me to give me a card or something. Okay, got it. Because I used to work for Congress, as you know. So I understand how this game works. So we now have a petition that we'd like everyone to go to. It's on moveon.org. MoveOn.org, and it's basically, David Trone, you said, who cares about that little cemetery? And the answer to that question is we do, and we vote. We do, and we vote. So we have approximately, thanks to Black farmers again, almost 400 signatures on the petition now. And Mr. Trone's office has called to ask for a meeting with us, and we've demanded that we speak directly to him. But he wants to sort of slush us off to one of his aides, and so we have declined his invitation. But we're prepared to talk to Congressman Trone if he wants to talk to us. After all, he made the statement directly to us. But that is the impression that a lot of, I think, Europeans and descendants of Europeans have about Black people. Why are these people fighting for the people that we consider trash? I mean, they were trash when they were living. We paid them almost nothing to take care of our children, to tend our yards, to clean our homes, to however they saw us. And then after we served white people, we died. And they consider wherever we're buried to be basically a place that they can just use. It's just trash in there after all, right? I mean, these are just Black people. So if we want to put a parking lot on top of them, what's the problem with that? If we want to put a high-rise building on top of them, what significance do they hold for human history? Why should we care? And so our movement is really fundamentally questioning European barbarism, that we are human beings, we are dignified, we are demanding of respect, and we want our ancestors, who were some of the bravest, most courageous, most resilient. In fact, we cannot even hold a candle, quite frankly, to our ancestors. They fought back and they weren't prepared to settle. Look how many of us are comfortable now, and we're not even prepared to stand up and fight for those who are not where we're at. That was not our ancestors. They fought. They fought from the moment they understood the situation until the day they died. That's an example that we need to understand more, and we need to become more like our ancestors. Every time I hear a Hollywood actress say, I don't want to play another one of those slavery movies, I'm thinking, who the hell do you think you are? Do you think that you're even at the knee level of one of our ancestors who was kidnapped as a child, came to this country, and had to survive every second of her life? And now you're saying you don't even want to portray this kind of exemplary, this kind of example of humanity with resilience. And it's because our history, when it's taught back to us, is taught back to us with so much shame and so many and so much miscommunication and miscommunication about what really happened during this period. So one of the challenges that we have basically created for ourselves is to tell the truth about what happened on River Road. And that's the reason why we've written 3 books now. And we're just beginning to understand the resilience of this community. This is a community of Black farmers who brought the skills from Africa to this area. Europeans didn't know how to grow crops on a commercial level. They needed Africans to teach them how to do that. They didn't know how to farm in swampy areas. They needed American agriculture is African agriculture. That's the reality. We were the ones that taught them how to grow food, as well as the native people in this country. And then they turn around and say that Black people were ignorant, when in fact their knowledge came from us. So these two movements can never be separated because, our forefathers were Black farmers.
Thank you. Explain to us some of the abuse. You indicated during our discussion about how the KKK
Mhm.
used to uh, act out in that area.
Right.
And also, there's a farmer who's, I think, still alive. And kind of give us a feel for uh, the struggle that he's been through and
Mhm.
where he is at this date, at this
Mhm.
time, because of the loss of land and
Mhm.
because he does not have that connection and own that land, or
Mhm.
we own that land.
Mhm.
Can you give me a little summary of that, please?
Sure. His name is Harvey Matthews, and his picture actually graces our third book. He's an absolutely amazing man. He's nearly 80 years old now. His family lived on River Road. In fact, his family lived in I think some of the most fertile and productive areas of River Road. The KKK, after the Africans, the area that was offered for Africans to buy on River Road was land that the Europeans felt was agriculturally unproductive land, swamp land, really sort of rocky land, um, uh, and and land that was prone to flooding. And so that was the land that Black people were allowed to buy on River Road. And his family's farm was no different. But what was interesting is that because of our intellectual gifts and because we understood how to work this kind of land, the Africans on River Road started being very productive. I mean, they were growing all kinds of crops on River Road, and the Europeans were coming to River Road to buy foods and fruits and vegetables and to have their animals tended. And after a while, they began to realize, wait a minute, we thought this land was agriculturally unproductive, but these Black people are actually making money off of the land that we allowed them to buy. And so what shall we do? Well, of course, it's to take the land back. I mean, that's the way the Europeans thought about this. And so the KKK was created in this area. Actually, the building that was sort of the founding building of the KKK is within walking distance of my home, and it's considered a historic building. It has all the bells and whistles and all the paperwork of a historic building, but not our institutions. But the place where the KKK was founded is a historic site in this area. And so Mr. Matthews' family worked this land. It was very productive, as well as the other Black families. And so once the KKK was established, they decided their primary focus, at least in this area, was to recover, was to steal the land back from these Black farmers. And they would march up and down River Road 2 or 3 times a week. And the Black community here had a tradition called blackout, was that when the signal men on both sides of River Road would let the community know that the KKK was about to march, the Black community would all sort of retreat into their homes, and they would turn out all lights, so it became completely Black inside the homes. And they would pray to survive the latest encroachment by the KKK. On a number of occasions, when the family refused to put their X on a sheet of paper, the KKK, in the case of Mr. Matthews, would actually enter the home, drag out the father, drag out the grandfather in his case, and nearly beat them to death in front of the family. But even that did not, even that Mr. Matthews Sr. resisted. He decided, no, we can still fight the KKK. We can still hold on to our lands. And then on one of these KKK marches, they came into the house again. They pull him out the house. But this time, instead of almost beating him to death in front of the family, they put him in back of a wagon and they kidnapped him. And they took him to an undisclosed location. We don't really know what happened because his father, Mr. Matthews' father, didn't share with the family what happened to him when he was isolated and kidnapped by the KKK. That's left to our imagination. But we know that at that point he did sign. He put his X on a sheet of paper. And the KKK told him, now since we own the land, you can stay there and you can farm the land. But at some point we're going to come back for our land. Well, as it turns out, they came back in 1 week and demanded that they leave their home. That home now is the site of one of the largest Whole Foods marketplaces. It's owned by Jeff Bezos. And Harvey Matthews and his family were forced off the land. Now that land of Mr. Matthews is worth, we think, about $50 to $60 million. But what happened to Mr. Matthews? Mr. Matthews and his family had to begin to recreate their lives all over again. They had to go to different schools. They had to start all over again, but without land this time, without land. And so Mr. Matthews found his way in terms of making, doing yard work and cutting grass and that sort of thing, when in fact his father and his grandfather had already laid the foundation for his intergenerational wealth by the land that they had purchased on River Road. That's just one example of just how land and intergenerational wealth come together, and what happens when that intergenerational wealth is stolen from our community.
Okay. Thank you. What I would like for you to do now, Marsha, and I thank you for the time to do this summary. Tell us actually what in the petition, how we can support you, and tell us about the petition. And we're going to close with you finalizing and summarizing really what needs to be done now and the kind of help that our listeners and our viewing public can give you in this regard.
So the petition is on moveon.com, and I can provide the link for that. We're asking everyone to sign it because we want Congressman Trone, and he'll become Senator Trone, there's no doubt, and he's got the money to buy the election. But we need for him to know that our community is not going to allow him to continue to insult us. So we ask everyone to sign for that. We ask you to please go to our website at Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition.net. And you'll learn a lot about this struggle. And we're hoping everyone will please go to our contact us section of the website. Contact us, send us your information so that we can stay in touch with you. We need money. This is a very expensive struggle. So if people would like to provide a financial donation, that would be incredibly gratefully received. It has been the community's financial assistance has allowed us to continue the struggle for 8 years. So we're asking for financial contributions, and we're asking for folks to come out and demonstrate with us. And you can learn about the various demonstrations by going to our website. So we're asking everyone to come out and support this movement.
Well, Marsha, Dr. Marsha Adebayo, thank you very much for coming on this evening, this afternoon, and giving us an overview of what we need to do and tell us very clearly what is happening with the Moses Cemetery project. And I want to commend you, your husband, and all the work that your group is doing to do something about the desecration of Moses Cemetery in Bethesda, Maryland. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Corey Lee from Tennessee, Nashville, that is. And I thank Gary Johnson, Black Men in America, for making this possible so that we can hear Corey Lee give us a summary, because he was not able to be on the show because we ran overtime on Seeking the Truth and Justice, which is Marty Oakley, made possible by Marty Oakley, TS Radio Network. And we were not able to have him on because Dr. Adebayo gave a very riveting summation about what was going on with the Moses Cemetery in Bethesda, Maryland. I thank Corey for coming and giving us time today to put together this video that we plan to share with our and viewing public. Corey Lee from Tennessee. Corey, a lot of people know you, so the only thing we need to do is we want you to tell our listening public and viewing public what the problem is still with the USDA, and tell them about what I consider the smoking gun that you found out, and I think as you move forward, and also the filing that you, and the reason why you have in fact filed in court in Tennessee on behalf of yourself as well as Black farmers of this country. Welcome.
So I can kind of give you what's going on in my world right now over the last 2 months, and some interesting things and points of law have now been presented before the court. Back in January, I went and applied to get a new farm ownership loan and a new farm operating loan. And if you read the Inflation Reduction Act, it squarely says in there that those farmers who were subjected to discrimination in the past before January the 1st, 2021, that they would be able to get new loans. And so I went to test it. So I went and applied to get a new loan. And basically, the people at the FSA here in Tennessee, which it wasn't their fault. It's all on Tom Vilsack. And so we had found, we substantiated my claims that Tom Vilsack and OGC put together a scheme. And the scheme was, so when the white farmers have been paid through the COVID-19 pandemic relief, CARES Act, American Rescue Plan Act, and the Trump trade boards, they were paid by direct deposit. And so when the few Black farmers that got any kind of debt relief through Section 22006 of the Inflation Reduction Act, they automatically made the payment. So when I went and applied for the farm and got rejected for it, they spelled out why the rejection was. So to distinguish what I just told you, they paid the white farmers that were getting pandemic relief for the last 5 years in direct deposit, which allowed them to either go make a payment on any alleged debts to the USDA, to any alleged debts to guaranteed lenders, any alleged debts to supply houses and so forth. By Tom Vilsack making an automatic payment, and this is on the letter that was sent to me on my denial letter, it says because the USDA made an automatic payment, it's considered a debt write-off, so I'm no longer available or eligible to get any future federal assistance. So now, what does that tell me? So even the white farmers who was distressed and were behind a couple of payments, that money was still sent to them through a direct payment. Even the socially disadvantaged farmers, which would include white farmers or distressed farmers through 2206, they got a direct payment. So what Vilsack was doing in retaliation against black farmers who may have a pending discrimination complaint from the 2008 Farm Bill, which a moratorium says that, and also those complaints, the moratorium was subject to the APA long before pandemic came. So Vilsack and OGC, what they sought to do, instead of making a direct payment to myself and other black farmers like me, they made an automatic payment so I could never get any future assistance. Well, there's nothing in the Inflation Reduction Act that says that Vilsack can settle those pending complaints. It supersedes the APA or the Administrative Procedures Act, which Vilsack had supposedly 180 days. In my case, it's been 16 years to settle those complaints that was lodged before the office, the Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights. And we all know that they have not had an Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights since 2016 for Dr. Joe Leonard. So to move a little further, well, back February the 8th, there was a letter sent to me from the USDA. And it kind of threw me way off because what it explained was that there was a package, a pandemic package for myself in the amount of $387,000. And said that they took $220,000 and paid off a debt that was actually had a moratorium on it that had nothing to do with the pandemic. So the logical question was, well, if my pandemic package was $387,000, even if you took the $220, maybe $6,000 or so, where's the $158,000 been remaining? That pandemic package was determined in October of 2022. We're now in March of 2024, and they cannot explain what did they do with the rest of the money and why did they not send me the rest of the money like they did the white farmers. Nobody can explain that. And so to go a little further, now they started off with the HUD system. And so they said that, Congress passed the law in which we're challenging that in court. So they stated to the court in Tennessee that I would be paid under Section 22007 in November or December of 2023. That didn't happen. So then they put out that through the press, or not really through the press, but word of mouth, that these black farmers would get that payment through 22007 in March. Now it's been told that it may be the summer. I heard from someone just Friday that black farmers are probably not going to get that money at all in 2024 because the hubs so-called has so many complaints that it's going to be 7 or 8 months before they can make determination, and then it's going to take several more months for the USDA to mail the checks. Well, if you go back historically and take a look at the events from the China trade wars with Trump coming forward, Sonny Perdue was able to put out $565 million on the first round of white farmers in 6 days after that. 6 days, $565 million. Tom Vilsack, when they took office, there was still money remaining. He got those same payments out of the same act to white farmers in 12 days. Now, why is it nearly 2 years later, a year and a half later, the black farmers still haven't been paid 1 dime. See, it's a delay. And Monica Raines, who's a senior assistant, was quoted in a paper down in Georgia. They were speaking that this is quote unquote, she goes, we meaning the USDA, are now reviewing the application process right now. What the act simply says in the Inflation Reduction Act in 22007 is that these hubs are supposed to be independent of the USDA, and the only thing the USDA was supposed to be doing was making the payment. So she's let the cat out the bag, but it's actually the USDA that's making the determinations and to give them an opportunity to retaliate against black farmers who have filed complaints in the past for discrimination. So that's now has been a complaint has been amended in the Middle District of Tennessee to include the hub system, because first, our argument is that Congress has already said that a private entity cannot administer a congressional act, and that administering a congressional act, that's how we came to the notion that, hey, the USDA never put any rulemaking out as required in the Federal Register. That means if the private entity says that they did the reviewing of the applications, then there's no appeals process. And so you have to watch Tom Vilsack. He's a very, very slick politician. There's not one man in modern times has been more destructive to the advancement of black farmers and ranchers than Tom Vilsack. He's a very, very skilled racist, is what he is. And the problem that I have is that our black leadership, they're in these meetings. They know exactly what's going on. They're getting sidetracked with Hunter Biden and protecting Joe Biden's son, opposed to making sure or having oversight on Tom Vilsack. His history speaks for itself. He's actually going into a court in Florida and says we're still discriminating against black people, and that hasn't been challenged. So it's very trying time. And the thing is, again, it's been a year and a half, and these black farmers haven't been paid. But also, I want everybody to be aware of, if they had a pandemic package through their own formulation, Congress granted to these black farmers and ranchers or socially disadvantaged farmers down to the cents. If they had it for me, that means they had it for everybody else. So the next logical question is where is the rest of this money for these black farmers? Nobody wants to give an answer. I sent a message today to Zach Ducheneau. I sent a message today to Dwayne Goldman, and they have not responded. But 157,000, 58,000 is a big deal. But more so, that money should have been directly put into my account, so I could have went and paid any alleged debt so I could get future federal assistance. That also means grants and things of that nature going forward. So basically, they're trying to make sure that black farmers and ranchers or black businesses that participate in agriculture will never participate if they ever owed Tom Vilsack money. So if they did it under Section 22006, will they be doing the same thing under 22007 for all the farmers that will be getting this payment? Will they say that it was, hey, this was a write-off to the United States and you can never get future assistance?
There's another question I think that needs some clarity. If you know all this information and we have people who are working at USDA, and you have all these groups around the country to give technical assistance, why aren't they saying something about this process? And why aren't people like Booker and Senator Booker and Senator Warnock, and Scott on the House Ag Committee, and you have Stabenow on the Senate Ag Committee, how is it possible that farmers are being allowed to be abused in this way, and we have these people who are considered to be experts remaining silent? Can you just shortly give me your opinion on that?
Okay, well, Secretary Vilsack sent out $70 million to places like Federation down in Georgia for technical assistance. Basically, that was hush money to be silent because they got paid money. Once you bought and paid for it, you can't speak against your oppressor. And so it was probably maybe 11 groups. The Federation was one. I think the Land Loss was another. And they have been paid to be silent. Now, they didn't apply for that money. Vilsack called them their trusted partners. Yes, they're trusted partners. Is give me some money and I'm not going to say anything. And as far as the politicians, you have David Scott sitting there. He was the chairman of the Ag Commission for the House. You have Sanford Bishop there. You have all those black farmers down in South Georgia, and those two scoundrels right there. Or Tom Vilsack is my friend. If you call that man your friend, you have no business representing anybody in Congress, and especially those black constituents down in your district. And it's now that what I'm hearing is that Senator Warnock won't even return the calls to those black farmers that he vowed to help. I always say that Ebenezer Baptist Church down in Atlanta was once home with the great Martin Luther King, and now Warnock is the pastor there, but King finished his race. He said, we may not all get there, but we're going to get there. Warnock got halfway through the march, figured out this load was too heavy. He turned around and went home and left all those black farmers down in the state of Georgia, state that he represents, at the discretion of one Tom Vilsack. History and Tom Vilsack amounts to the same, but you got to understand, it's not. Tom Vilsack is not doing anything that Joe Biden is not allowing him to do. All this stuff is in the White House, but you come and send people like James Clyburn out here, saying, Mr. President, Black America's behind you. No, we're not. Because the problem is you take people like a Clyburn who wants to speak for all Black America while Biden and Vilsack is destroying rural Black America. We're not behind you. And in fact, if the GOP was not so terrible or somebody else would run against Biden, they know that they won't get that White House again in 2024. But they will not. Remember when Obama was the president and Biden was out there saying, when you have differences with people that you should be able to sit down with and shouldn't be into the neck. Name one time Joe Biden has sat down with black farmers. And there have been multiple requests. He won't even sit down. Joe Biden doesn't see black people as human. But you have the Black Congressional Caucus sitting there, trying to pander their community for a man who's been more destructive to his legislative history than any Bull Connor or any George Wallace. That's a fact. You see, it's our leaders who have been bought out sitting at the table and think they're doing something so glorious while this man, Joe Biden, is destroying black farmers. There's nothing beautiful about that. If you ever get on the other end of the discrimination that's been handed forth by Tom Vilsack, it's not pretty. He admits it and he laughs at your face. What are you going to do about it? And our leadership is there. We have to replace most of the members of the Black Congressional Caucus. We need the young lions as a Jasmine Crockett from Texas. We need to come here to Tennessee and look at a Justin Jones and a Justin Pearson. That's black leadership. Not afraid to take on the establishment. But right now, we got a whole lot of shoe shuffling coming out of Congressional Black Caucus. And that's not good enough for Black America. We have got to make a change. Once we clean up our house, then we can make situations better for our people. But right now, what we have in place is not sufficient.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Corey Lee, for coming on Seeking Truth and Justice this afternoon. I thank you very much. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close?
No, it doesn't be today. Just in the next couple of weeks, once we get their response in, we'll come back and they will try to articulate in court for the very subjects that we named at the beginning, and I'll be able to pass it on to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.